Hey all, Peter Zeihan here coming to you from Atlantic City. Today we're going to update a series that we did last month called The Russian Reached, which looked at the logic and the actions of the Russian government and how they were attempting and probably successfully attempting to penetrate deep into the American government right up to and including the White House. So the purpose of this is to give you an idea of how much has evolved in just the last 3 or 4 weeks, and it's unfortunately a very long list. First off, keep in mind that the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, is somebody who most of the intelligence community has thought of as a Russian agent for quite a few years, and one of the first actions that, let me put it this way. If she's not a Russian agent, she's probably a traitor, because the Venn diagram of her worldview and Vladimir Putin's are pretty much identical. I mean, there might be a little bit of not overlap, like a half of 1%, but that's largely just hairstyles because, Putin is bald and Gabbard's hair is fabulous. Anyway, she's pretty much completed gutting the counterintelligence arms of our various intelligence agencies, so most of those staff aren't even doing the jobs that they once did, allowing the Russians to really plow into American society however they want. Also, the Trump administration has largely dismembered the parts of the intelligence community and the State Department that were there to protect our election integrity from Russian intervention. Same thing for web hacking, and the Department of Justice has largely stopped investigating white-collar crimes, most notably fraud and cryptography, wrong word, like Bitcoin scams, which are another way that the Russians really enjoy getting their claws into American society and the American government. We basically just stopped enforcing those laws. The same goes for white-collar crimes in general, which of course for a country like Russia that is corrupt and uses its intelligence systems to undermine societal stability all around the world is something that has made their job a lot easier. The next big issue is, of course, Signalgate. Now, Signalgate happened back in mid-March, when the United States was preparing military assaults against the Houthis, which are the militant group in Yemen. And basically the entire top tier of the American national security team, including defense and intelligence, and Gabbard, of course, basically participated in a chat on the Signal chat program. Signal is a platform that's supposedly secure, but the week that this all went down, the Defense Department's internal intel indicated that the Russians had probably hacked the encryption protocols. So basically, the American national security apparatus were all using what had become an unsecured platform to communicate basically operational intelligence. Tulsi Gabbard, again, testified about halfway through the revelations to Congress that this really wasn't a big deal and no one should be overly concerned about it, because of course it's not. All right, let's see what's next. Rick Grenell. He is an on-again, off-again semi-diplomat who is working for the Trump administration. He worked for Trump 1, did a really bad job, basically just went around talking to the German neo-Nazis the whole time, so the Germans wouldn't deal with him at all. Anyway, he's back in the administration now, and he's one of those people that is so unlikable that even Donald Trump doesn't like to have him around in person. So he kind of hovers outside of the West Wing and is basically spewing anti-Ukrainian Russian propaganda in the ears of Trump Jr. because he can't get the ear of Trump himself. Specifically, he likes talking about the Budapest Agreement, which was something that dates back to the immediate post-Cold War years when the Ukrainians gave up their nuclear weapons. Basically, Grenell is spouting the Russian equivalent of that deal, their interpretation of it 15 years on, and basically trying to get the Trump administration to disenfranchise Ukraine as a state, and suggesting that they've never had a claim to anything in the first place, which is, of course, exactly what the Russians would love the Trump administration to believe. Let's see. Next up, we've got Peter Navaro, who is the manufacturing advisor to the president, very pro-tariff guy. He started using Russian propaganda that has been recently designed and released into the ecosystem that's specifically targeting Canada. So Navaro has always been an anti-free trader. Don't really have a huge problem with that. But it's interesting to see Russian propaganda popping up in his statements on TV now that are very specifically tailored to a very specific issue that really wasn't an issue in the Russian propaganda sphere until just a few weeks ago. Then we have Donald Trump reporting Russian propaganda on everything from broad strategic issues to very tactical issues. So, for example, near the end of March, Trump started talking about how Ukrainian troops in Kursk had been encircled by Russian forces, and this or that should happen. Well, I mean, that never happened. The Ukrainians were able to withdraw from the Russian province of Kursk fairly, I don't want to say easily, but without a lot of casualties. And in fact, that withdrawal had been completed more than 48 hours before Trump is supposedly asking the Russians to modify their operations in Kursk. So this is something that actually came from internal Russian Federation propaganda that was designed to shape attitudes within Russia itself, but somehow it got on Trump's desk. If I was a guessing man, I would say that probably happened via Gabbard directly. On Greenland, the Russians are trying to convince the MAGA spear that a joint invasion, Russians in the north and Americans in the south, would be a keen idea. Something that would obviously shatter NATO overnight and end America's defense alignments with the Scandinavian countries, and in my opinion are going to be the future of the American alliance network in Europe, which of course is something that the Russians would love to see destroyed. You may have heard of Tim Pool. He is a far-right influencer that's very tight in the MAGA space. He has a number of podcasts and video logs, kind of like me a little bit. He's been basically indicted, I think is the technical term, for taking somewhere between $400,000 and $10 million from the Russian state. Basically, they're shoving money into his platform to help spread disinformation throughout the American MAGA sphere. He claims he didn't realize that it was going on. That's his official stance, and the investigation is impending. But, he has on any given day somewhere between a number of followers similar to me and twice as many. And I can guarantee you that if $100,000 per video release that I did suddenly showed up in my bank account, I would not need the FBI to tell me to investigate the shit out of that. So let's just say I don't take him very seriously. But the most important part of this is that Tim Pool is now part of the White House press pool. The Trump administration has brought him into the inside while kicking out, those liberal rags like AP and Successful Farming. And then finally, a name that you may have started to hear bouncing around, Alexander Dugin. He is basically a run-of-the-mill Russian fascist who has been advising Vladimir Putin for over a decade now, basically making up the ideology to justify genocide against anyone they feel is necessary. And until a year ago, most of his vitriol was ultimately reserved for the United States. So preemptive nuking, death camps, that sort of thing. He's a real peach. Anyway, he has started making the rounds of MAGA publications in the United States recently. And of course, the first one, the first of the big ones that he did was none other than Tucker Carlson. Now, you guys may remember Tucker Carlson used to be a Fox News host. Tucker has been fired from every media job he has ever had for lying on air about things on purpose. And since he left Fox, he has now basically migrated directly into the orbit of Russian propaganda, and most of his shows deal with Russian propaganda from a sharing it with the world point of view. Perhaps the most concerning thing I have in the information space as regards to the Trump administration is not this Tim Pool thing, although that's not minor, but this is the American administration throughout history that has had the least contacts with the media of any form. It's not just that they're not talking to more liberal groups like, say, the New York Times. They're not really talking to Forbes or Bloomberg or the Wall Street Journal. They've basically shut out everybody. But many members of the Trump cabinet have done extensive one-on-ones with Tucker Carlson. So we basically have a gutting of the normal means by which an administration would normally interact with the country and focused on a very, very few avenues, of which the bigger ones are already in the Russians' pocket. Anyway, don't have a lot of great news on that front, and I will leave everyone to their own recognizance as to what's going to happen next.